Okay, so we gotta be quick because we're running out of light, but it's perfect weather. So, we're gonna be talking about self worth. Now, I feel like this is gonna be like a new thing that we're gonna do. I gotta find a name for this, but I think it's great. The reason this came to me is because I'm part of this new group, and we were talking about seeking envy from other people and approval from them at the same time, which is an interesting concept because the context here is like being well versed or like knowing a lot about something and like sharing it with people. For example, cars, right? Knowing a lot about the car that you drive, wanting to share that with other people, and like your knowledge is like, I guess, very important to you. You want to share it, right? And it comes off like a lot about this topic, but then there's a sense of pride that comes with it, you know, and it turns into something like instead of sharing out of love because you love the thing, you're sharing because you want approval from that person, or you want to make them feel, I guess, kind of envious that you know so much about something, you know. But that's a very interesting concept to think about. Is like seeking both envy and approval from other people. You know what I mean? And I guess when it comes to like self worth, from a world perspective, generally speaking, it comes from perception. You know, like the way that other people see you versus the way that you see yourself. You know, because like your impression, I guess, because impressions are everything. Your first impression kind of sets the tone as to your character, I guess, like who you are on the outside, which may not be who you actually are in terms of your identity, right? So it's like your identity versus your impression on other people, right? So it's like who you are versus how people see you, kind of thing. And it's like from there we can kind of understand that all comes from the fear of being judged, right? Because that's part of the concept that we were talking about earlier, the fear of being judged, right? Another side to this would be, who are we trying to impress? Like, is it worth compromising our character? Is it worth actually believing that perception that other people have on us versus, actually being who we are, in our identity? And that goes back to like knowing oneself, like actually knowing who you are. And as long as you have that strong, firm foundation in your own identity, then you wouldn't have that need to impress. I know it's natural to like try to fit in, because it's always awkward when you're like not, I guess. But at the same time, I'll put it to you this way. So you have 4 different friend groups, right? But out of all those friend groups, how different do you act between them? Like, do you switch your personality around one person over another? Because let's put it this way. The way you act in front of your friends is probably not the way you act in front of your parents, So it's like, are you compromising your character or are you really being yourself, And is it appropriate to, I guess, code switch, if that makes sense, around other people? Now, you could argue that, you're adapting to your environment, or you're trying to make other people comfortable by acting different. But at the same time, it's like, is it worth it? Like, going back to that one question, like, is it worth compromising like your character? And I think that's kind of like the norm now, though. The culture of today is finding approval and trying to appear to be something more than what we are. But I don't think it has to be that way, My final thoughts on this, my 2 cents, and something that I gotta work on is understanding that I don't live to impress other people, and that trying to gain approval from others is not really worth it if it's not who I am, And as someone who doesn't have a lot of friends and someone who spends a lot of time by themselves, it's like I can't imagine being different. I was, back before when I was around a lot of people, I was always, trying to get that approval and trying to get that, that impression that, I'm somebody, but it's all kind of pointless. And now that I know that, it's like going into this new chapter, I'm just gonna do my thing, and just like not care too much about people's approval. It just got darker. Hang on a sec. Okay, well, wait for the lights to warm up. But yeah, so that's one thing that I gotta work on is just affirming my own identity and where I stand, and then just building off of that foundation because that's all I got, So I guess it's like my new attitude towards this whole thing. In a world where comparison is so common now with social media. Yeah, that's my take on it. Comparison, the whole perception thing, and not trying to conform to culture in the way other people see you. So, but other than that, I guess that's all I have for today. Yeah, or I'm gonna maybe start doing more of these because I enjoy them. So, with that being said, I'm gonna drink the rest of this, clean the inside. Until then, good night.